What's up, guys? Welcome back to XP Share, where I share my experience of becoming the biggest artist on the planet. I'm Eric Jr. Today is episode 18. Today's episode 18, and I am going to actually have a topic to talk about today. So the topic I'm talking about today is this idea of um, when you're trying to get better at life, and you read a lot of books and you do a lot of exercise and something like 75 hard, whatever. When you have that mentality of like a growth mindset, you're constantly looking for different ways to shape and frame your mind, so that way you can look at things from different angles. You can appreciate things different ways. You can feel a certain way about something just based on how you think about it. So that's a really big, and you could sum that up into basically frameworks, right? Alex Hormozy talks a lot about it. I'm never going to stop saying his name because he's incredible. But in general, you find it in a lot of different places. It's been, you think of like a Tony Robbins, the GOAT self-help guy who like everyone hates, like half people hate, half the people love, right? And like whatnot. And so everyone has a different way of looking at the world, and that's how they, basically go about life. And as you get older, your way of looking at things changes shape, and basically always are trying to look for a way to look at life that serves you the best, right? And so I'm constantly on a quest for that. I'm always looking for different ways to look at life whenever things I'm looking at are not satisfying, or whether I'm, not feeling like how I want to feel. And if that's the case, I always think of like, okay, how can I look at this differently so that way I can feel differently about it, basically, right? So a big paradigm shift that I made a while ago that I'm kind of making again in life, or I'm reintroducing to myself, is this whole idea of like everything that you've ever experienced in life is like an illusion, right? We all know about this in some way, shape, or form. The Matrix being the classic one, and it's been a lot more mainstream lately. It's the year 2023 for anyone watching this later on, but I feel like at least me personally, I've been onto this like years and years and years ago. I just never could really fully like articulate type shit. And it's probably gone throughout history. I mean, there's a quote from Albert Einstein that talks about the delusion of man is how he separates himself from his reality, and not thinking that there's oneness between it. You think of all the stories of when people take shrooms from like the 70s or the 80s, and they're like, yeah, bro, like one with everything, bro. Like I see myself in the trees, bro. Like, so this isn't a new concept, but however you want to look at it, whether life is a dream, whether we're in a simulation, whether this is the Matrix, whatever your version of it is, right? So the book I'm reading, Busting Loose from the Money Game, the way they go about it is he basically talks about how the way that this is all set up is this is like a game, basically, right? This is the human game that your consciousness, which is your true infinite self, you think of if yourself had the power of like a god type shit. And let's say as a god, the same way that a human might want to go to an amusement park or go to an arcade to just try out different games, the god of this universe, being yourself, decided, okay, I want to feel something, or I want to do something outside of the realm of just my regular, everyday, infinite self, I guess. And the idea is that you would then create what's called the human game, which is everything that you've known up until now. So you would create this idea of planet Earth. You would create this entire storyline of how we came to be. You would create different philosophies about it, because if there was just one ultimately accepting thing. So you basically do everything that you can to convince yourself that you're not the God that you actually are, that you're not this infinite powerful being that you actually are. And you limit your power. You try to make it so that you are convinced that you're just a lowly human. So the idea is that that's why you're birthed into this world as a helpless baby. That's why you have parents to indoctrinate you or to program you with the rules of this universe. Hey, don't touch that. Hey, this hurts. Hey, if you do this, you'll die. Hey, if you do this, blah, 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 blah. And you learn all these rules about life. And then as you get older, once you get to like 18 or early 20s and you start living on your own, you start to realize that a lot of the rules that you learned about life aren't actually real, or don't actually apply in every single scenario. And you start slowly unlearning and breaking down and stripping away the things that don't serve you, and you build it back up to become the person that you ultimately end up being for the majority of your life, until your next big change, if that ends up happening. So I love this idea, right? It's a great concept, because it takes a lot of pressure off of the human experience. It makes it so that it's not so heavy all the time. Like, oh, what's my purpose? Am I wasting my life? Why is it so difficult? Why are things so hard? Am I just unlucky? What's going on? Why do I feel angry? Why do I feel sad? Why do I feel happy? Do I deserve to be happy? All of these, what's the meaning of life? All these crazy questions that we bombard ourselves with, and it just takes the pressure off that, because it's like, dude, you're just here to experience what it is like to be a human, because your true infinite self doesn't know what that's like. It can't know what that's like to be a limited being, because it's infinite. It's infinite potential, infinite energy. And so the book is cool because it goes into a little bit of quantum physics and like a little bit of the science behind it too. I'm not gonna pretend like I completely understand everything. I'm not gonna try and like explain it to all you guys. And you know, do your own research, figure out your own way to look at it. But I just want to give you the premise of like what the topic I'm talking about is, because however you feel about that, whether you believe it or not, whether you think that we are in a simulation, whether you think that this is all just a dream, right? Like that's one of my favorite examples or metaphors. The best way, if nothing I say makes sense, think about it like this: when you're in a dream, right? Everything that is in that dream is technically you, right? So when I am in a dream and I'm walking in a forest, not only am I me, the person walking through the forest, I am also the forest itself, because it's all a creation of my consciousness. So every little atom, every little molecule, every leaf, every piece of stick that's on the ground, every piece of dirt, the earth beneath me, the sky above me, the oxygen in the air is all a piece of my consciousness being manifested into this dream. And it feels so real. It feels like reality, but it's really just a dream. I created it. So that's the idea, that the same way you can create a dream and put yourself in the shoes of the dream, sometimes you're not even yourself, right? A lot of dreams we are in other people. We're not actually even in our what we think of as ourselves. So the same way that we can do that in a much grander, unfathomably great and miraculous scale, we have a consciousness, we have a true self, an infinite self that created what we perceive to be the physical reality. We all know that there's more than 3 dimensions, yet we can only perceive 3 dimensions. We all know that time doesn't technically exist, but we are at the mercy of time and we have to work within the limits of it. So it's like we acknowledge that there's bigger stuff above us, but at the same time, whenever you talk about this stuff, people look at you like you're crazy, which is fine. It sounds very crazy. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, people thought that the earth was the center of the universe, and that was considered normal. And if you said anything else against that, you seemed like you were crazy, right? So as time goes on, people are gonna adapt different concepts, and what was crazy 500 years ago, what's crazy now might not seem so crazy 1,000 years from now. So whatever, that's the idea, right? However, when I think about stuff like that, right, and I think about how good it makes me feel when I think about the world in that sense, like, wow, everything is really dope. Because when you think about it like that, like, everything is good. There is no bad, because there's no such thing as bad, because you created the concept of bad, because only your judgment of something can make it seem bad. The reality is, right, if you look at it that way, everything is exactly what it's supposed to be, because you created it the exact way that you wanted it to be created. Same way that Christians might look up at God and say, oh, everything has a purpose. God created everything with a purpose. There's a reason for everything. It takes a lot of the weight off of the emotional, it takes away a lot of the emotional baggage and a lot of the judgment from the situations. It just becomes the situation instead of a bad situation or a good situation. It's just the situation. It's just the experience. It's just embracing how it feels, embracing how it's affected you, what you gain from it, what you lose from it, even though you don't technically lose anything. You know what I'm saying? And it makes it a lot more peaceful in general. It makes you a lot more prone to feeling joy. It makes you a lot more prone to feeling abundant, all that stuff, all that good self-help talk, right? But the issue with this is that when you think about it, right, someone like me who creates art, what is the point of creating art? For me personally, right now, is to be able to connect with other people. So if I live in a world where I pretend, but I acknowledge and I accept that no one else on this planet actually exists, and that is really just a creation of my consciousness, then it would theoretically take away some of that drive of trying to connect to other people. I guess you could say maybe I'm just trying to connect to other pieces of my consciousness that seem separate from me, and I'm trying to glue it all together. Maybe that's like part of the mission. That's actually the first time I thought about that. I'm happy I'm making this video, because I'm articulating certain things and making connections. But if you take that away, it really becomes a game of like, oh, I'm just playing this game by myself, right? Like, what's the point of me expressing how frustrating it is to be broke and poor and people not listening to my music and feeling like I'm slept on, if I accept the reality that I created the situation for myself? You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. So let me switch it a little bit. Let me go to something else. So Kendrick Lamar's the Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, right? I think it's a great example of this. If you pay attention on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, they mention Eckhart Tolle a lot. And he's the author of a book called The Power of Now, which is extremely famous for a bunch of at-home moms who read the book and go, oh my God, it made me feel so good. Like Oprah style, like it's kind of a mean book. It's like the Tony Robbins of self-help books, but it's really dope because it basically just specifically hones in on the idea of time being an illusion, the idea that time is the only thing that makes us like stress out realistically, right? Like if you break everything down and push it to a long enough time horizon, nothing really matters. You feel me? There's only the present moment, blah, 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 blah. And it makes you feel really good about life. It makes you feel a lot less stressful. It makes you feel a lot more at peace. But then when you think about, and then so also Eckhart Tolle, he was the therapist for Kendrick Lamar throughout the album creation process. I don't know if people caught that, but a lot of people don't seem to mention this, which I think is super important. Kodak Black mentions it. He says Eckhart Tolle in a funny way. And Kendrick mentions him a couple times. And if you, I forget where I researched it, but I remember seeing that that he reached out. Oh yeah, his wife, his spouse on one of the songs says, you need to talk to Eckhart. So he was saying that he had received therapy from him, right? And when I discuss the album with my friends, I always say, look, it's a great piece of art. It's a beautiful artwork, but it's not a great listening experience as a consumer, as an outside listener. It's not a great human experience. It's not a great experience. Like, it's hard for me to connect through that album. The only song I really, really connect to is Father Time. That one, he felt like he was really speaking to an audience almost. At least maybe because that situation was so what's the word? Resonant for me, being that I didn't have a father in my life, right? So I'm biased in that case. But even if you look at like the technical aspects, like that album was not mixed well. If you listen to how those songs on that album sounds versus any other TDE album or any other Kendrick album, like they purposefully made things sound a bit more raw and like not up to the standard of a high quality album. They did it on purpose. And you know this for two reasons. One, because when he accepted his Grammy speech, when he accepted his Grammy award, he literally said, I'm happy, something, something, something. I think we finally found imperfection with this one. That's what I remember, quote unquote. Or I'm slightly paraphrasing, but I know he said something very, very close to the effect of, I think we really found imperfection on this one. So his goal was imperfection. He had made 4 classic albums, basically, or 3 classic albums and Section 80. Don't kill me. If it's a classic to you, it's Kendrick, bro. You know how I feel about Kendrick, the GOAT. But until me, of course. But now he's like, okay, I've made perfect albums my whole life, or at least I've tried to. Let's do something different. And that's great. I mean, it made for a beautiful piece of art. It's going to set a precedent for a lot of artists moving forward, including myself, who look at it differently. But if you look at it from an objective standpoint, like, he didn't make the beats hard hitting. He didn't make melodies that specifically would be enticing to a lot of people. He did the opposite of Damn, right? Where it was like, Damn was the most appealing album you can listen to front to back, barely any skips. Like, everything was crafted to sound good. Everything was crafted to scientifically, like, hit your ears in a way that created dopamine and serotonin in your brain. Mr. Morale was completely raw. It was completely made just to be a self-serving, I am just trying to express something. I'm trying to, just do something, right? And I'm not thinking about other people really when I'm making this. I'm making this purely for me. And I think about how those two things connect. Oh, and the other reason I know is because this is a very small anecdote, but there's a point where XXXTentacion released his, I believe, 17 album, and Kendrick Lamar actually retweeted it and said, pure raw emotion, or something along those lines. So we know that Kendrick Lamar is a huge fan of like raw music, like not unpolished, just real grit, like, something that the mainstream media doesn't like. He's a real fan of that, the underground stuff. And so I think about this because in my situation, right, like I'm in a tough situation from what most people would consider, what I would consider a tough situation, just financially, just logistically, just, I'm an underdog in my situation. I'm currently in hell trying to climb my way out, right, as I've said, Tim Grover style. And although I find a lot of peace in that I'm on my journey, I'm doing the things I'm supposed to, I know that the story is going to sound really good. I know a lot of people are going to connect to it when I do triumph, when I do overcome, and I become the success story, right? And people are going to be able to follow in my footsteps, and it's going to be great. And, I'm going to be able to connect to a lot of people and inspire and motivate and all the things I want to do. At the same time, I don't have to do any of that. I could just go the Kendrick Lamar route. I could just go the Eckhart Tolle route. I could just go the busting loose route, where I just look at life as, oh wow, like this is just my creation and I can just exist in it, and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to try and make money because money doesn't exist. I don't have to please the people that I love because they're just people. They're just things that I created. I can just live how I want to live. Like I don't have to do anything. I can just do the things I genuinely want to do. and whatever happens, happens. This is my experience. This is how it's supposed to be. So it's a weird dichotomy. It's like a weird push and pull, because when I think like that, it makes me not feel like that aggressive, like hunger to want to like out rap niggas, you feel me? Like you think of a Dreams and Nightmares from Meek Mill, one of the best rap songs in the history of hip hop. That song comes from the real human experience. That grit, that passion, that hunger comes from really feeling the weight of all those emotions and all those experiences. So you don't get something like that by thinking like how Kendrick Lamar is thinking on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. You know what I mean? Even though technically speaking, being, healed and feeling at peace is what we strive for, when we're trying to create art and be an artist, people gravitate more towards the real weighty emotions. You think about the typical, like, when an artist is happy, he makes shitty music, and then when the artist is depressed or goes through a breakup, that's when he makes his best album, and everyone's like, damn, I really love this, like someone should break his heart again. And it's like, fuck, like I just want to be happy. Like, but when you're happy, you usually don't make great music, because great art comes from the expression, the expulsion of all those weighty emotions. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that and flesh out those thoughts, because I think it's super interesting. Like, I guess the ideal scenario would be to have like a switch you could flip, where it's like, okay, now I am in human experience mode. Now I want to flesh out and expose all these. I want to feel the weight of all this experience, but without getting too deep. I want to be able to then also, choose when I want to step out of that and just look at it from a consciousness perspective, from a this is all a dream perspective. This isn't as serious as it needs to be. And it's like interesting. I'm going to do my best, I guess, as life goes on, to really figure out how to consistently hop back and forth between the two. Because if I just live in the, everything is a dream world, then I'll feel great, but I won't be able to relate to other people. How am I supposed to have a conversation about, if a homie is going through something and I'm supposed to empathize with them, but I can't empathize when I don't even think you exist? Like, isn't that kind of crazy? You feel me? But then vice versa, if I'm constantly just at the whims of my emotions, and I'm constantly just stuck in the human experience, and I feel like I'm trapped, and I feel like I'm limited, and I feel like I have no control over anything, then I'm just going to be depressed and angry all day. So it's an interesting topic. I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about, because I know it's a little bit, out there concept wise, but this is some real shit. And yeah, maybe someone out there, it might spark an idea, it might spark someone's mind. And that's all I got. So boom, peace.